The 10 digits we use to make up every possible number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9 mostly have names that are fairly phonetically spelled. Like when you hear the word 5, it makes all the sense in the world that it's spelled F-I-V-E. Likewise 6 being spelled S-I-X or 9 being spelled N-I-N-E are all pretty sensible too and make ample logical sense. This easy to grasp spelling isn't the case for the name of every number, however. This is perhaps best seen in the spelling of the number 8. If 8 were to be spelled phonetically, it would be something like A-T-E, which yes is actually already a word, meaning to have consumed some food. Of course the number's name isn't spelled like that. Instead it has the far more illogical spelling of E-I-G-H-T. This is a really weird way of spelling out the word 8, and if said more phonetically, it would sound more like Igahata or something. While I'm picking on just the letter 8 here, it actually isn't the only digit which has an odd spelling. 2 might be better suited being spelled T-O-O, with its current spelling maybe sounding more like to-woo when said out loud. And 1 would be more logically spelled as W-N-O, with the way it's spelled now possibly being pronounced as Oni. Honestly, the reason I'm solely picking on 8 today is actually down to the fact I was watching telly the other night and the word 8 appeared on the screen and I was like, that's actually a really weird spelling. Where did that come from? Yeah, the idea for name explaining videos can come from literally anywhere. When we compare 8 spelling to most other number spellings, it really does seem odd. The thing is, most English speakers have probably never thought all that much about how weird it is. This is mainly because English spelling is all over the place at the best of times. Due to the language's bizarre history, most native speakers of the tongue are acquainted with the idea of letters and words making sounds they don't normally make. These illogical spellings can even follow a pattern too, and crop up across multiple words. This is what's happening with the word of 8 and its spelling. 8 features the word forming element of IGHT to make something akin to an IT sound. This crops up in many other words here in English too, like light or fight or might or plight or height. It's pretty commonplace across English, and like we see in 8, the spelling when compared to the actual pronunciation of these words don't add up all that much. A word like height, in example, would be better suited being spelled H-I-T-E. The strangest part of these spellings is the GH slap bang in the middle of all of them. GH appears in many other English words too, aside from these IGHT ones. Think of words like ought, draft and slay in example. When it appears, it never really makes a guh sound like banjo makes when he gets a jiggy. Instead it makes a kind of soft H sound, or not really much of a sound at all. It seems to instead help change the sound of other letters in the word it appears in. There are actually examples of words used in English where it does make a more pronounced sound, however. Think of ghost or spaghetti. The reason it's more pronounced in these instances is down to the fact these words have foreign influence or are borrowed from other languages which don't have the same rules as English. Ghost, in example, was influenced by Flemish, while spaghetti was lifted directly from Italian. When we understand how English ended up with the GH letter combo in so many of its words, it explains to us not only why 8 is spelled in such a weird way, but why so many other words that feature them are too. While today, most uses of the GH combo have it being silent or functioning to alter other letters, that wasn't always the case. In English's past, GH was used to make a far more definitive sound, a sound that doesn't really exist in the language all that much anymore. The technical term for this sound is a voiceless velar fricative, and it's that kind of hocking up sound made at the back of the throat, the hoch sound. It does sometimes appear in English today, often with a CH spelling instead. Think of a word like blach in example, which is one exclamation than an actual word. It's a tad more common in other languages. Think of the word loch found in the Celtic languages of Scotland and Ireland, and Dutch is well known for using this sound too, seen prominently in the name of their most famous artist, Vincent van Gogh. In Dutch we even see it with the GH spelling. It also has many remnants in German. Words such as hoch, lich and nach feature much softer versions of the hoch sound. What's interesting here is that many of the words that feature this sound in German feature the GH spelling when translated into English. Those three German words translate into high, light and night respectively. This is even seen in the German version of the word 8, which is acht. German seems to have stuck with using the CH to represent this sound in spelling too. English is of course a Germanic language, and to this day still has many similarities to the modern German tongue, so it makes all the sense in the world as to why English would feature this sound in the past, in a time where the lines were far more blurry between the language of English and the language of German. Things started to get a tad trickier, however, when English diverged more from German. One thing that really saw older English and older German diverge was the large Romance influence English acquired over the years, this being via the time of Roman rule in the land, as well as the Norman invasion of Britain in 1066. This led to English getting a heavy dose of Romance, including the use of the Latin alphabet, which the tongue still uses to this day in its written form. Prior to this, the oldest forms of English were written with runes known as fufor. It was fairly easy to apply the Latin alphabet to the sounds of English on the whole, in most cases anyway. There were difficulties with certain sounds Old English made that weren't really representable with the characters of the Latin alphabet, one of those being the h sound which English featured, thanks to its Germanic roots. This meant the Latin alphabet had to be a bit more creative when it came to representing this sound in Spelt English. A few different situations arose from all this. In some cases, they didn't use the Latin alphabet at all, and instead carried on representing this sound with a rune known as the yoch, which looks like the number 3. Yeah, this rune would just randomly appear in the middle of a word spelled otherwise with the Latin alphabet. This didn't last forever, as eventually just an H started to be used to represent this sound. This was logical, as the h sound is very breathy, and the sound H makes is somewhat breathy too. Huh. Eventually, however, to save on confusion between knowing if H should make its usual h sound or its h sound, the sound instead became represented with a G and an H. This put English in a really good spot. It had finally figured out a way of representing this unique sound via the Latin alphabet. This would be the end of the story if English pronunciation didn't decide to completely upend itself and ruin so many of the spellings the written form of the language had laid out. This was via the Great Vowel Shift. This was a period of history from around the 15th century all the way until the 18th century. For a huge variety of reasons, the pronunciation of various sounds in English, most commonly vowels, started to be said differently. It's something I've tried to figure out before, but whenever I go to research it, these charts can't. That just make my head melt in on itself and I just give up completely. All you really need to know is that the Great Vowel Shift led to pronunciation of English changing dramatically, and one of the key casualties of this shift was the h sound. It shifted from its older guttural sound still heard in languages like German and Dutch, and morphed into its far more silent sound as we know it today. While the Great Vowel Shift resulted in huge changes to the pronunciation of English, in most cases the spelling never really caught up. For the longest time, spelling in English was very willy-nilly. People would spell words however they felt like it. English spelling was only really standardized across the 14th to 15th century, while the Great Vowel Shift was going on. This meant that by the time this shift in pronunciation ended, the spelling of most English language words had been set in stone to reflect the pronunciation of these words prior to the Great Vowel Shift. This must have been really annoying for the people sorting out the spelling. It kind of reminds me of how Universal spent millions creating a Donkey Kong themed land, only for Nintendo to change the design like the moment Universal were finished, leading to Universal being left with this immediately outdated land they had spent years working on. Man, that's the second Rareware reference in this video. Go play Donkey Kong Country, Banjo-Kazooie or Viva Pinata after watching this video. But what this all means for us, and the GH we find in words, is that once upon a time, these letters served to represent a unique sound no longer found in English, but the spelling was never changed. This brings us back neatly to the word this video was supposed to be all about. 8. If we look into the history and evolution of this word, we can see how the rise and fall of the h sound in English and the history of English spelling led to its modern form. We are able to track the evolution of 8 thanks to the Oxford English Dictionary and the amazing work they have done in recording the English language. We see that the earliest mention of the word in Old English has it spelt as heta, with just an H being used to represent the h sound. We mentioned earlier this was the case in the far past. This word ultimately comes from the Old High German hator, which comes from the Proto-Indo-European octu, which also gave us the Latin octo, a term still heavily linked with the number 8, seen in things like the name of an 8-sided shape, the octagon, as well as an 8-tentacled creature, the octopus. By 1175, we see 8 being spelt as hater, and in 1225 we see acht, which is akin to the German word and uses ch to make the h sound. In 1297, we even find it being spelled the aforementioned yoch rune as chat. 1425 shows us the word acht, and in 1490, we see the first instance of it being spelled with a gh as chet. It was around this time that the Great Vowel Shift started happening, however, so those two previous spellings of the word might have used a more soft pronunciation. We aren't sure, as obviously we have no recordings from this time. The Great Vowel Shift also explains to us another mystery behind the spelling of 8, where the E at the start makes more of an A-like sound. E's sounding like A's was a big part of this shift, but as we carry on, we find it in 1541, which might have been pronounced with the h sound, or could have been more in line with the pronunciation we have today. And finally, in 1645, we find 8 spelled as it is today. How it was pronounced at this time is of course a mystery. The spelling seems to have maintained more or less from here, and as the Great Vowel Shift carried on, the GH in the word would have stuck around while the actual pronunciation of it fell to the wayside. This all resulted in the spelling of 8 we have today, a spelling that might seem incredibly strange to us now, but once upon a time made an awful lot more sense. Also, my throat hurts so much from making the huck sound in this video. German people, Dutch people, how do you guys do this all the time? Do you have like throat sweets on you at all times or something? Seriously, I need like a tea and honey right now. If someone could go get that, that would be great. Thanks. Name Explain depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explain videos, and your name at the end of the video with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/Name Explain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm NameExplainYT, and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, thank you all so much.